The Veterans Day banner went up at 7:00 a.m. right above the janitor's closet where my name wasn't. Names Hal Wheeler, 68, floor buffer by trade Navy by blood. The smell of burnt coffee lingered as I clutched a folded flag no one asked about. Ever wonder what gets forgotten when the cameras roll? Every morning before sunrise, Hal Wheeler swept the Jefferson High courtyard like clockwork, quiet, invisible, and always 15 minutes early. The sky was a pale bruise of purple and silver as Hal unlocked the side gate, letting himself into the grounds. The coastal breeze carried a chill even in Florida, this early in November, tousling the few strands of gray hair that peeked from under his cap. He moved without hurry, pushing the mop bucket ahead of him, rubber soles whispering against the concrete. The courtyard was littered with dry oak leaves blown in from the parking lot, amber crisp and defiant. A familiar tune, soft and almost inaudible, floated into the morning air. Hal whistled "America the Beautiful" under his breath, more out of habit than sentiment. With slow precision, he began his sweep, pausing to pick up a crushed soda can and tuck it into the side pouch of his rolling cart. His thermos, steel gray and dented, steamed faintly as he took a sip of the black coffee inside. No sugar, no cream, just as he'd always had it. The first lights flickered on in the school library windows. Inside, Mrs. Brewster appeared as a soft blur behind the glass, her white nurse sneakers squeaking as she moved between shelves. She caught sight of Hal and lifted a hand in a quiet wave. Hal responded with a nod, his expression unreadable. Their exchanges were always wordless, but not unfriendly rituals carved by years of repetition. Down the hallway, near the main entrance, a brass plaque was mounted at eye level commemorating Veterans Week. Beneath honoring our veteran faculty were framed photographs of 8 former service members who'd since joined the Jefferson staff. Neatly printed names, branch insignias, and years of service etched beneath each picture. But the last slot on the bottom row remained empty, just a blank stretch of beige corkboard surrounded by poster edges and red, white, blue borders. Hal passed by it without slowing, though his gaze lingered for a breath. Just a flicker. Then he turned left toward the janitor's closet. The school began to stir. Teachers arrived in clusters, car doors slamming in the lot, voices rising with caffeinated cheer. Inside, Mr. Langley, fresh from some urban district up north, was already hunched over the copier in the administration wing, his collar crisp, his attitude sharper. When Hal passed by the glass-paned office carrying a bundle of paper towels, Langley offered no more than a glance that paused just long enough to register Hal's uniform, then moved on. In the central hallway, Maddie crouched with a DSLR, trying to angle a shot of the sunlight hitting the veterans' banner. She perked up when Hal came into view just as he reached up to untangle a small American flag caught in the entrance fan. Click. Hal didn't flinch, but he noticed. Maddie offered a sheepish grin. "That looked kind of cool, Mr. Wheeler," she said. "You helping the flag like that?" "Just keeping it upright," he replied. His voice was calm, smooth gravel. Then he moved on. Later, outside the library, Brewster cracked her door open and stepped halfway out. "Mr. Wheeler," she called gently, holding a paper cup wrapped in a napkin. "There's hot chamomile, if you ever want." He lifted his thermos in polite refusal. "Appreciate it, ma'am. Already started my day?" She smiled anyway. "One of these days I'll catch you." "You might," he said, and the moment passed like steam from his cup. Down the hall, a new poster lay half-taped on the corkboard, honoring our heroes, Veterans Week. Red stars bordered the edges, and 8 faces smiled proudly from it. At the bottom, one photo slot gaped an empty frame had slipped off the tape and fallen behind a nearby bench. Hal's eyes paused on the space. He crouched with the ease of someone used to reaching under things. Fingers found the frame and lifted it silently. He dusted off the corner, then stood and set it back where it belonged. No one saw him. At 6:42 a.m., he picked up the empty photo frame that had fallen behind the bench and quietly put it back. Someone replaced Hal's carefully cleaned bulletin board with a new veterans wall without asking. It happened overnight. The board he'd wiped down for weeks, the one beside the main hallway with the faded cork and cracked plastic corners, now bore a sleek replacement bright white laminate beveled frame and bold lettering, Veterans Faculty Recognition Wall. Hal paused with his cart just a few feet away, mop handle in one hand, eyes scanning the rows of photos printed on glossy paper. Teachers in fatigues, a guidance counselor in a Coast Guard uniform, even the vice principal's Air Force ROTC portrait from college. But not him. His hands remained still, but his knuckles tightened just slightly around the mop pole. Langley's voice echoed from around the corner before the man himself appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Wheeler, I need that hallway cleared before 7:30. We're filming B-roll for the ceremony. Please keep the custodial carts out of frame." Hal gave a curt nod, turned the cart around and moved down the adjacent hallway lined with scuffed lockers painted blue long ago and never touched since. Langley's brisk footsteps faded behind him. By mid-morning, the school buzzed with preparation. Students passed by in groups, pausing to admire the new wall, some snapping pictures. Teachers laughed and shared stories in the lounge. Not one of them mentioned the old bulletin board, or who had maintained it with such quiet care. Outside Emma's grill, a bell above the door jingled softly as Hal entered. The place smelled of cinnamon toast and fried eggs. He took his usual seat in the back booth furthest from the window, unfolded a copy of the Pensacola Times, and let the chatter around him blur into white noise. A waitress poured him black coffee without asking. "Didn't think I'd see you in here today," a soft voice said. Mrs. Brewster slid into the booth across from him with a cautious smile, a small paper bag in hand. "Pumpkin muffins. Baked this morning." He offered a polite nod. "Thank you, ma'am." She hesitated. "You hear about the Veterans Wall going up?" "I passed by," he replied, folding the newspaper over a section about the storm heading north. They didn't check with you? I thought maybe someone from admin." No one asked. Hal said, voice even. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a handkerchief the shade of old olive drab, and wiped a ring of condensation from the table. Later that afternoon, Maddie wandered into the storage closet near the library searching for archival photos for the yearbook. Amid dusty binders and retired file boxes, she found an unlabeled manila envelope slipped between two old yearbooks. Inside a stack of black and white staff photos. She paused when she reached one. A younger man, broad-shouldered, square-jawed, in a Navy SEAL uniform, stood in front of a jungle tent, arms crossed. The name stenciled on the flap read, Wheeler H. The corners of the photo curled slightly with age, but the man's expression was unmistakable. Maddie looked up, blinking. She walked down the hall toward the library and found Brewster reshelving a stack of poetry anthologies. "Miss Brewster, is this our janitor?" Brewster took the photo, her breath catching just briefly. "Oh, my Lord. Yes, that's Hal. This must be Vietnam era, maybe." "Why isn't he on the Veterans Wall?" Maddie asked. Brewster didn't answer at first. Then softly, "He's never said a word about it." At 2:15, Langley's voice rang through the intercom in the teacher's lounge and echoed faintly through the halls. To all staff, as a reminder, only recognized military-affiliated faculty are to participate in tomorrow's Veterans Ceremony. Please check the roster if you have questions. Maddie looked down at the photo in her hand again. A crease ran diagonally through the image, but the eyes staring back were steady. Not proud, not angry, just watching. As the final bell rang and the school began to empty, Maddie found herself standing outside the janitor's room, her hand hovering near the doorknob. She knocked twice, then opened it slightly. "Mr. Wheeler, were you ever in the Navy?" The school's veterans newsletter came out and Hal's name was nowhere to be found. Maddie unfolded the trifold paper freshly printed and still warm from the main office copier. Under the bold header, Jefferson High salutes our heroes. A neat list followed names, ranks, and branches of service. Mr. Grady from Chemistry Air Force Reserves, Coach Peterson Marines. Even Mrs. Gutierrez from cafeteria staff had a line. She read it twice, then a third time. No Hal Wheeler. The memory of that photograph resurfaced. Hal, decades younger in jungle fatigues with a steely stare like someone you'd never forget. Yet the school had. Again. Across campus, the courtyard sat in a rare moment of stillness. The flag was up, waving crisply against the early November breeze. But Hal wasn't there. At the front desk, Brewster lifted her eyes from a returned stack of books as Maddie approached. "They forgot him," Maddie said without preamble, holding up the newsletter. Brewster scanned the names, her mouth tightening. "I showed you the photo," Maddie continued, voice hushed but insistent. "That's not some guy from a costume party. That's SEAL material." Brewster nodded slowly, fingers pressing into the edge of the counter. "I saw that face in Bahrain 1991, she murmured. "Different. Time, different uniform. But I never forget a face like that." Back in the library, Brewster climbed the small step stool behind her desk and pulled down the old faculty roster's dusty binders marked 1989 to 1993. Her fingers moved quickly, scanning names, flipping pages. Nothing under Wheeler. No military designation, no record of hire from that period. Maddie tapped her pencil against her notepad. "So, he's been here a while?" "At least since before 94. I came in 95 and he was already part of the woodwork," Brewster said. "Never missed a day, never talked much, but always had that air. You know what I mean?" Outside in the diner, 2 blocks down, the usual Thursday morning clatter was off rhythm. Emma's Grill had a habit of playing patriotic songs during Veterans Week. That morning, God Bless the USA came through the radio in soft, twangy chords. But the booth in the back, Hal's booth, was empty. Emma, the owner, wiped her hands on her apron when she noticed. First time he skipped breakfast since '09, she told her fry cook. Coffee's still hot. By mid-morning, Langley was grinning ear to ear. He'd just confirmed with a local news channel Jefferson High's Veterans Day ceremony would be televised live. He had handpicked the speaker order and approved final video reels. "This puts us on the map," he told Coach Peterson, who just nodded with a half smile, already half regretting agreeing to speak. When Brewster passed Langley in the hallway and asked carefully whether any support staff had been considered for the ceremony, he shook his head. "We've only got airtime for official faculty. We've kept it clean." "No offense." "None taken," Brewster replied, but she didn't smile. That afternoon, Hal was seen only once crossing the staff parking lot just before lunch, eyes lowered, moving quickly. Maddie spotted him from the second-floor balcony and raised a hand, but he didn't see, or didn't want to. Back in the library, she stared at the photo on her phone again, then asked Brewster, "If he is who we think he is, why doesn't anyone know?" Brewster leaned back, eyes narrowing. Then, without a word, she picked up the phone and dialed. After a few beeps, she reached the local office for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Her voice lowered steady as she asked, "I'm trying to verify service for a Harold Wheeler Vietnam era, possibly Navy." There was a pause, then a faint voice through the receiver. Brewster's face changed. Her eyes locked on Maddie, and she didn't speak for a very long time. At exactly 11:11 a.m., as the school band played a rehearsed tune, a convoy of 3 black SUVs rolled quietly into the parking lot. The brass instruments held a shimmering note as the color guard froze mid-step. Students turned in their seats, shielding their eyes from the midday sun. Teachers paused, squinting toward the commotion. The SUVs were spotless tinted and unmarked, save for the subtle emblem on the plates, which only a few would recognize. Langley hesitated behind the microphone, one hand frozen mid-gesture as he glanced toward the vehicles. He cleared his throat, forced a chuckle. "Well, looks like we've got quite the turnout today," he said, but his voice wavered. Rows of students sat in metal folding chairs, some restless, others wide-eyed. Camera crews adjusted their angles. The local news station's van had backed into position an hour ago, antennas raised, capturing every second. Near the base of the flagpole stood Hal Wheeler in his Navy janitor's uniform. Sleeves rolled neatly cap low over his eyes. He hadn't moved much since the ceremony began. Just a quiet shadow near the edge, one hand resting lightly on the pole. Mrs. Brewster, standing near the front row, in a conservative navy blue dress, turned slightly. Her eyes searched until they landed on Hal and stayed there. Her hands clutched a folded program, knuckles white. From the lead SUV, the door opened with soft finality. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. Silver hair clipped close, wearing a dress Navy uniform heavy with bars and medals. Behind him, two others followed, also older, also SEALs by the way they carried themselves. The band stopped. The only sound was the gentle ripple of flags in the breeze. Captain Sullivan walked forward with solemn precision, shoes silent on the pavement. His eyes scanned the crowd, passed over the students, over Langley, and stopped at the flagpole. He walked directly to Hal. Langley took a step forward, raising his hand. "Sir, I'm not sure if Captain Sullivan didn't look at him." He stopped precisely 3 feet from Hal, spine straight, and raised his right hand in a crisp, formal salute. "Master Chief Wheeler, permission to honor you, sir." A gasp moved through the audience like a wave. Maddie, positioned behind the stage with her camera, lowered the lens. The viewfinder had caught the salute, but she didn't need a picture to remember it. Hal didn't answer right away. He looked at the captain, really looked, and nodded once, slowly. Then, after a breath, he returned the salute. Not flashy, not hurried, just right. Sharp, earned. Langley's face paled. He took a step back from the microphone, lips parted. Hal lowered his hand. For the first time in years, he spoke loud enough for a crowd to hear. "For those who can't be here," he said, voice gravelly. "Calm. I accept this for them." The schoolyard fell into stunned silence. Not even the flags seemed to move. From the second SUV, one of the SEALs brought forward a polished wooden box. He handed it to Sullivan, who turned and opened it, revealing a medal encased in velvet and engraved with, "In quiet service we remember. Master Chief Harold Wheeler, U.S. Navy SEALs." Captain Sullivan turned to face the crowd. "This man led my unit in Bahrain 1991. He taught us what it meant to come home alive." Maddie raised her camera again, fingers shaking slightly. Off to the side, Brewster whispered under her breath, so quiet only the breeze could carry it, "I knew it was you." The school's hallways looked different that Monday morning. Posters of Hal appeared on every locker. It wasn't just the placement. It was the way each one was printed in thick, reverent sepia with the words, "Thank you, Mr. Wheeler," stamped below in the school's navy and gold colors. They'd been taped with care. Not a corner peeled, not a poster skewed. Maddie had coordinated everything with quiet determination over the weekend, and when Hal entered through the back gate, like usual, coffee thermos in one hand, mop pole in the other, he paused. Just a moment. A flicker of something in his eyes. No one said anything at first. Teachers moved with awkward grace, offering nods more hesitant than usual. A few students whispered as he walked by, not giggling, but softer, as if measuring their words for the first time. Hal didn't slow down. He moved through the rows of lockers like he always did, letting the mop head glide across the floor, whistling faintly, though not his usual tune. It wasn't America the Beautiful this time. It was quieter, almost searching. Mrs. Brewster was already in the library when he passed. She had swapped her usual knitted cardigan for a navy blue jacket with faint white piping along the sleeves, a relic from some nursing conference long ago. Her nurse sneakers were freshly bleached. When Hal passed by, she stood up, not hurried, not dramatic, and walked beside him for a moment. "They put them up early," she said gently. "I noticed," he replied. She offered a small paper bag. "Muffin, I already had one. You left it on the bench out front." He hesitated. "Ah." She didn't press further. Just let the silence settle. Later that morning, she found him outside by the loading dock behind the cafeteria, where he sometimes took his breaks. He wasn't smoking, just sipping from his thermos and staring out at the trees, their branches bowed slightly under the weight of a Gulf breeze. "I wanted to ask you something," Brewster said, taking a slow seat on the bench beside him. Hal nodded, not looking at her. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old photo, edges curled like autumn leaves. It was grainy in black and white, but the face in the middle, drenched in sweat and blood, one arm clutching a stretcher, was unmistakable. "I carried that photo from Bahrain in my footlocker for 28 years, she said softly. "I never forgot the medic who dragged 3 men out from under fire that night. But I never knew his name." Hal blinked. "Just once. I remember your voice," he said. "Yelled at me for not ducking. Said I was the dumbest brave idiot you'd ever seen. And you told me I had hands like sandpaper." She smiled. They sat for a while, the wind playing with the edge of the photo between them. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" she finally asked. He ran a hand over the back of his neck, fingers brushing the collar of his faded green work shirt. "I stayed silent because I lost too many. But silence doesn't mean I wasn't proud." That afternoon, Maddie found a box in front of her locker. Inside was a folded flag in a triangular case, a single note, and a Polaroid taped to the lid. The photo showed Hal much younger in full Navy uniform beside a group of soldiers. They were laughing. The note read, "For your paper. The story's not mine. It belongs to them." Brewster read it later that evening in her office. She'd just finished typing the title at the top of a page for the janitor who served quietly. Emma's grill was quiet that night. Faint jazz filtered through the speakers, something from Coltrane's softer records. Hal sat in his usual booth alone, but not ignored. The waitress brought over a small mug and winked. "On the house, Mr. Wheeler. And every house after this." He smiled at that. Brewster stepped in 10 minutes later and sat across from him. They didn't need to talk. But after a pause, she took out her phone. "May I tell the principal what you just said?" The new hallway sign gleamed under morning light. Hall of Hal, keeper of quiet courage. It stood centered above the west corridor, framed in solid oak with brass lettering that caught the sun's first reach through the windows lining Jefferson High's freshly repainted walls. The color was new and inviting pearl gray, chosen by the student council, though no one had quite noticed how well it matched Hal's mop bucket. At 6:03 a.m., Hal Wheeler unlocked the east entrance as he'd done for decades. His movements slower but deliberate. He paused by the threshold, watching how the light pooled across the polished tile, turning soft amber as it crept upward to catch the edge of the plaque bearing his name. He said nothing. Each locker now bore a miniature poster, black and white portraits of Hal in his janitor uniform. Sleeves rolled up, sometimes a faint smile visible, other times solemn but steady. Maddie had coordinated the effort over the weekend, rallying students to print and paste them. Most had never seen the man speak above a whisper. But that no longer seemed to matter. Hal's footsteps echoed as he walked the corridor. He didn't carry his mop yet. Today he just walked. Past the wooden benches, cleaner than they'd been in years. Past the new bulletin board that read, "Unsung Veterans, the Names You Didn't Know." At the bottom, in handwritten script, someone had added, "Harold Wheeler, SEAL, Custodian, Guardian." At the receptionist desk, a second plaque glinted beside the bell. Harold Hal Wheeler, Navy SEAL, retired janitor, Jefferson High School, 1987, present. Below it, a note taped discreetly. To the man who watched over our mornings. Students wouldn't arrive for another hour. Still, the space no longer felt empty. There was a presence now, not loud, not demanding, but felt in the stillness, in the respect given not out of obligation, but of realization. In his office, Hal found a white envelope tucked beneath his thermos. No stamp. Inside a card with faded navy ink, Master Chief. Some of us still owe you more than we can say. Next spring we gather again, this time not in uniform. Come if you like. We'll keep a seat for you. Sully. He turned the card over. On the back, P.S. We finally got the picture right. Outside, Brewster arrived with her usual shuffle. Her nurse's sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished tile. She carried two things, a printed copy of the school newsletter and a disposable coffee cup with Emma's grill stamped in red cursive. "I figured you'd be in early," she said, handing both over. The newsletter headline read "Unsung No More, Honoring Harold Wheeler." Beneath it, Brewster's article, 2 columns, neat paragraphs, and one large photo Maddie had captured. Hal lowering the school flag at half-staff on Memorial Day, sunlight catching the edge of his hair expression, unreadable. "Print run's already gone," Brewster said. "They're putting it in the yearbook, too." Hal nodded, then motioned toward the hallway. "It's a bit much." "No," she answered simply. "It's just right. Took us long enough." They stood silently as Maddie appeared from the stairwell, camera bag slung across her shoulder, sweatshirt sleeves pushed up. She gave a small salute with 2 fingers and held up her phone. "Guess who got a call from the State Journalism Board?" She grinned. They loved the piece. Said it read like history. "Don't forget to spell my name right," Hal replied, his voice dry but amused. "I triple-checked." Maddie walked on, disappearing into the seniors' wing, her boots squeaking with youthful purpose. Later that morning, Hal visited the faculty lounge, something he rarely did. No one was inside, just a tray on the table, a lemon poppy seed muffin with a post-it note. "For H.W. Brewster made me do it. E.G." The handwriting belonged to Emma herself. He didn't eat it, but he sat down just for a moment and looked out the window toward the lot where 3 black SUVs had rolled in days ago. He remembered Sullivan's salute, the weight behind it, the ghosts it summoned, the silence that had stretched too long. Hal reached into his shirt pocket and unfolded the same little notebook he always carried. Pages filled with scribbles, tasks, reminders to fix the boiler switch near room 212. But one page was blank. He flipped to it and wrote carefully, Monday 11/14, new paint, new light, no mop needed today. He closed the notebook. Back in the hallway, Brewster stood beneath the sign. She was humming something soft and familiar. When Hal approached, she didn't speak at first, just looked up. "We used to call this wing the Lost Corridor," she said. "Now, everyone's calling it the Quiet Walk." Hal looked at the plaque, then at the flags, the clean benches, the wreaths that had multiplied like whispers left behind. "No speeches," he said. Brewster smiled. None needed. At 7:25, the first bell rang. Students spilled in, voices lifting like birds startled from a wire. Some slowed by the hall of Hal, others stopped completely. A few took selfies, though no one dared climb on the bench anymore. Hal stood back, coffee in hand, watching. A freshman tapped his friend. "That's him," he whispered. Hal pretended not to hear. He nodded to the custodian trainee pushing a bucket nearby. The sun had risen fully now, casting long slashes of light across the polished floor. It shimmered against the brass, lit up the posters, danced across the lockers, where Hal's face looked back 100 times over. He stepped toward his office, paused, then turned back and walked to the center of the hallway. There, directly beneath the oak sign, he took out his notebook again. And in a line just below the one he'd written that morning, he added 1111. Maybe not invisible after all. In a quiet hallway where once there was only silence and footsteps on old tile, now stands a name unspoken for years, yet never forgotten by those who saw more than a mop and a cap. No ceremony could match the dignity of steady service, nor outshine the quiet courage of a man who simply showed up. Sometimes the loudest kind of bravery is the one that doesn't ask to be seen. Kindness, especially the kind given without fanfare, has a way of finding its way back home. So the next time you pass someone in the background, ask yourself what stories might they be carrying just out of sight. And if this story warmed your heart, perhaps share that warmth with someone who feels invisible today.